Hello and welcome to Raising Those Spirits. I'm Steve,
And I am Sam.
and I just want to get ahead of everything this week. So this week we are doing Mirror Mask, but um, since we record and do all this early, this was all decided and done before Neil Gaiman got canceled.
I
So
feel like we're still in the process of him getting canceled.
yeah, I
I
mean
mean,
it's
we've had this one on the docket for kind of a while.
yeah, but it's not going to come out for another 2 weeks. So like
Oh, that's true. He'll be even more canceled by then.
yeah, I like this.
That
It just it's weird. It's just like I don't want people to be like, don't they know? And it's like we do, but like we actually started it before this really long process.
you know, that one hurt. I mean, Joss Whedon hurt. Neil Gaiman hurt, and also it wasn't just that Joss Whedon kind of made sense when he got canceled. When Neil Gaiman got canceled, it was like, oh, I really don't want this to be true.
Oh,
And then I kind of read his response to what. Mhm.
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I was saying I read his response to it, and he said something like, "Oh, that woman has a condition where she like makes up false memories or something like that." And I was like, "You, dude, you gotta be kidding me!"
Yeah, then
It's like that does not sound right.
he then followed up with because like 3 or 4 women have like accused him now, and he's just like, look, I'm autistic and I have trouble reading social cues, and I'm like, that doesn't mean you can sexually assault people.
No, it's one of the it's like no, sir. That is not fair. There
Yeah,
are plenty of people who are neurodivergent and do not assault people.
yeah.
I would say the vast majority.
I've always got a sketchy vibe off of Neil Gaiman, so I was not shocked for this one. Um, but I understand a lot of people are.
I mean, it was one of those things where like I was surprised and then I thought about it. And it's just like, in retrospect, it feels like anytime you have someone who really seems like they go out of their way to be a feminist, male feminist creator, like you look back and it's like, oh, now this feels really disingenuous, and I can see how it was disingenuous.
Yeah,
And now, yeah, I want to go and like who are the other? Is there anybody else who's like making that claim right now, and we need to be skeptical of them?
oh God, I mean, not that I'm actively
I'm
aware of. We've digressed too far, folks. We're just gonna move out of the intro. We got lost in the
Yes,
weeds.
we did. So now is a perfectly good time, I think, for us to take a trip out of the weeds and to Missouri or Missouri. I don't know what the right way to say it is. I'm going to say Missouri.
It
That's how
ends in
I've
an
always heard it
I.
pronounced. Yeah, but I feel like if you see it, like like in TV or movies, they always say Missouri. But I'm not going to try and do a Missouri accent. I don't even know. I know one person from St. Louis, and he sounded north. He just sounded like everybody else, so I don't know. I'll channel my friend Ben Mazer, from sorry.
I know him.
Oh, have you met? Did you meet him?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was your
you must have
roommate.
when you visited college. Oh, he was no, he wasn't my roommate, but he was around a lot.
Okay, yeah,
It
I've
makes
met
sense that you met
Mazer.
him,
Yeah.
I'm sure. And at any rate, so the cryptid. So for our cryptid segment, the cryptid that I found from Missouri was one of the most, I think, mundanely bizarre. I don't know how to describe it. So this is the side hill hoofer. And it's described in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's described as being similar to a horse or a donkey, but a little smaller, fully grown. It's about the size of a foal, so it's small. Other times I've seen it described as being more similar to a beaver. Sometimes it's described more similar to being somewhere between a cat and a dog, like a hyena sort of animal. And it is known for living on in hilly areas and mountainous areas. And its defining feature is that It has longer legs on one side than the other side. So there's two species, one with long legs on the right side and short legs on the left, and the other species that is the opposite. And they live on the side, like steep hillsides, because they can stand upright on those hillsides and they can move with pretty incredible speed. However,
What if they have to
they
turn
can't move,
around?
they don't. So that's why there's one species that has left leg, long legs and right long legs. They can only go clockwise or counterclockwise, depending. Um,
That's
the
that's
species,
hell.
if they run into each other, often they will fight. If like one is going one direction and the other from the other species is going the other direction, if they meet each other, they will battle. In instances where the side hill hoofers or gougers, there's also side hill gougers. It's described differently. Um, if they mate, it won't be like, oh, it has just short legs or just long legs. They'll have one long leg in the front and one short leg in the front, and then the opposite long and short legs in the back. And we'll kind of just flop around until it gets eaten.
So even
They don't mate. So they don't mate frequently. And when they do, the offspring are often killed.
even worse. Okay.
And if they end up on flat ground, they'll just move in circles. They can't move very far. And again, will then be attacked and eaten by larger uh, predator animals.
We
Uh,
haven't had cryptids that battled in a long time, so I'm immediately feeling this one.
I love it. I feel so bad. It's like I couldn't find the origin of this one. Like I found a couple, I found a lot of descriptions, but I couldn't find where the origin of this cryptid came from in the hour or so research I did on it. But it just makes me laugh to think of just like a tiny donkey that has to live on a hill because if it makes it to flat land, it will just be killed by something.
It's it's
They can
mad.
only move they can only move up or down the mountains they live in like little short increments. So they just have to get at an angle.
There's
What
these
is
sad little guys.
At first I was like, okay, this has to be like one person on one website making up a silly story, but like no, there's plenty of people who've talked about this animal, this cryptid. And it's one of the most unique ones we found because there were plenty of like, oh, there's Bigfoots and stuff in Missouri. No, the side hill hoofer is my favorite. I love it.
This
It makes me laugh.
seems like something we would have come up with after Midjourney screwed up and we would have ended up deciding it was too silly.
Right? Like, no, we're not going to pick that one. That's too dumb.
Yeah, we have to
Let's
take
make
this a
that the
little
long.
seriously
We're serious creative artists here. We're not going to have anything silly like a short leg, long leg donkey.
because we have
Um,
standards and we
but I love it.
respect. I'm not opposed. I again, we haven't gotten any good battles between. I feel like more cryptids should be enemies.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, but if the Wendigo runs into the Bigfoot, like, why don't we have any of that?
I mean, we could have it. I mean, these are just side hill hoofers fighting each other. Oh, another thing I read, they will charge humans. They typically don't bother humans, but they will charge a human if they feel threatened. But it's very easy to escape them by moving a little bit to the right or left
Or
because they can only move
yeah,
in mostly straight lines.
how tall are they?
About the size of a foal,
A
so
foal.
like a baby deer. They're about a full grown. They're about the size of a baby deer or a
Okay.
baby horse.
I wouldn't even really feel the need to sidestep.
I mean, like if it's got the kicking power of a baby horse, you don't want to get kicked by a baby horse. That's gonna hurt a lot. And break a leg. That could really hurt you.
All right. Well, you
So
said
you don't really
deer.
need to
Deer
worry.
is different from horse.
Okay, well, I mean, like the description of this animal is sometimes it's similar to a horse, sometimes it's more like a deer or even an alpaca. Sometimes, again, beaver, giant beaver. I saw it described as a very large beaver, or even again something more along the lines of a wolf cat hybrid. They lay eggs, Steve. They
Okay.
lay eggs,
How?
and
They can only live
one
on hills. How do they not roll down the hill?
doesn't. I mean, it boggles the mind.
Does
The
every
eggs
one of these start at the bottom of the hill and it slowly walks around and up the hill in a circle and then like by the time it reaches the top, that's the end of their life cycle?
Steve, it didn't say that anywhere, but we should add that to the lore because I think that works perfectly.
Awesome.
Yeah, add it to the lore. All right, anybody from Missouri who's listening, add that to the lore because that makes sense. They are born, the egg is laid at the top of the hill, it rolls down, the hoofer is born at the bottom of the hill, and then has to make its way back up like a salmon.
Yeah, this is very simple. Don't screw this up, people from Missouri.
Yeah, simple. The eggs can feed 25 men, one single hoofer egg.
How?
I don't know. That didn't make a lot of sense. The eggs must be very big. But even so let's think of like a baby horse lays an egg. How big could that egg possibly be that's feeding 25 grown men?
Maybe it's like incredibly dense protein.
Maybe? Because I mean, like, okay, so let's say reasonably for breakfast, if you're having eggs, everybody's having two eggs. That means this egg needs to be the size of 50 eggs? That's mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, how
And
many
50.
men can an ostrich egg feed?
Not 25. And that's like the biggest egg that you're gonna generally get.
How many people can an ostrich egg feed? An ostrich egg can feed between 8 and 12 people.
So we're talking like at least four ostrich eggs
Yeah.
sized?
Ostrich eggs weigh 5 pounds. So this is
So
a
we're talking a
20
20
plus
pound.
pound egg.
This is like the size of a turkey.
Yeah,
Like
I
a
don't
big
know.
turkey.
I want to love this guy, but he's making it hard.
Steve, I love it even more than I did.
I
I love
just,
that you added to the lore. I love that, like, oh, the eggs roll downhill. That's where they hatch, and then they have to climb up the mountain the rest of their lives.
it's
So
the
they can
only
make
way
more
it makes
tiny,
sense to me.
lopsided horse babies.
Oh man, I started a anime recently called Heaven's Design Team, and it's just basically the
Hmm.
team that makes all the new animals, and it's there's a lot of stuff like this where they're like, no, that just won't work. A lot of cryptids are just things they tested out and just didn't work out.
I mean, that makes sense. God would never allow such a creature to exist. It has no place on this earth.
They've said that once or twice, and God then immediately approves it. So, you know,
Or that's like a platypus.
it may have been the platypus. Yeah, but all right, I love it. Missouri, I didn't have high hopes
Uh,
for you, but impressive.
no, they Missouri pulled through on that one. Steve, what are you drinking?
Okay, so I am not a gin man, but I did find a drink. So I like Rickies, like a lime Ricky.
Oh, okay, like a lime Ricky.
Yeah, I like Rickies. And so there's a Circus Ricky cocktail that I felt was appropriate for end of summer because it's a gin drink. They just had like the U.S. Open, like it's gin season. So It's juice of half a freshly squeezed lime, 2 jiggers of gin, half an ounce of grenadine, and then you top it off with sparkling water.
Oh, that sounds good. I mean, like I love gin, so I mean that sounds good.
Yeah, I'm not a huge gin person, but I feel like this would be amazing if I was. Like, I can
Mm.
recognize that, like, for people who like that, this is very good. Like, so that's what I've got. What do you got?
So I found the Smoke and Mirrors cocktail. And hold on, I have the ingredients on my phone. And pull it up. Oh no, that's my info on the side hill hoover. All right. Ingredients in Smoke and Mirror cocktail that I found from a Queen Bee mixology website. 1 ounce Bacardi Superior rum, 1 ounce mezcal, half an ounce lime juice, half an ounce blue curacao, 2 dashes of bitters, and a few pieces of dry ice, which you shake together and then pour over ice. And in true fashion, I didn't have all these things on hand. I had the Bacardi Superior rum. Didn't have any mezcal, but I did have tequila. I know they're not the same thing. It's what I had. I did not have mezcal. I didn't have fresh lime juice, but I had sweetened lime juice. And I had the curacao. I had the bitters. Um, it is not good how much I like this drink. It is bad how much I like this drink. I like this drink a lot. It is very, very good. And
Okay.
I have consumed a good amount of it before we started recording this podcast, as you might be able to tell.
I mean, that's great. I
There's a
mean,
lot of nights where I like take a sip of something. I'm like, I'm not gonna finish this, and I'm like, I want 4 of these. This is delicious.
hey, I mean, eventually you not following the recipe is gonna lead to a few treasures.
No, I mean, I was just telling a coworker about the time I didn't have simple syrup, so I used maple syrup in an absinthe cocktail, and it was my favorite absinthe drink I had ever had. Sometimes you just gotta, you gotta work with what you had. Oh, did I say there was supposed to be dry ice in this? I guess that's the smoke portion of the smoke and mirrors. I did not have dry ice, and I can't recommend using it. If you swallow dry ice, you could destroy your stomach.
Yeah, that would be incredibly bad.
Very, very bad. So don't do that. You could just enjoy the mirror portion of the smoke and mirrors, without any danger to your body, like, other than a hangover, which I will certainly have. And I am very glad I don't have any meetings tomorrow. I am going to go to the work. I'm going to go to work and just be like, I'm just going to sit at my desk, guys.
Today's the
Because, I
day.
mean, ultimately, there's only 2 shots. I mean, this isn't like super strong drink, but it's a lot for a Tuesday.
Yeah, it's a Tuesday night. Yesterday was Labor Day, so tomorrow being Wednesday is like amazing because I've only had to work one day.
Hmm.
Oh man. All right, so we did Mirror Mask.
Mirror mask.
So I saw this when it originally came out. It's something I was actually actively following back when we were in college in 2005 because I was like following the making of it because it wasn't going to be released in theaters. It was going to be a straight to DVD, so you really had to pay attention.
Mm.
And I really enjoyed it. And then I haven't really watched it since college, so I was happy to dive back into it.
Okay, and how did you feel revisiting this movie after, oh no, 19 years?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my wife and I actually made a big date of this when it came out. Like I got it on DVD. It was a day, and it was really nice to revisit. It has got a great soundtrack. I actually own the soundtrack.
Mm.
I've listened to the soundtrack much more recently than I'd watched the movie. um, it it has such amazing visuals still. It's like a mixture of The Wizard of Oz and Labyrinth. It's like if you told the Jim Henson workshop to make Labyrinth without the Muppets, like,
Hmm.
but it's definitely got a Wizard of Ozzy story. But no, my only major complaint about Mirror Mask is when I first saw this, I was unfamiliar with Coraline, and I'm like, we already treaded this with Coraline. It's just like the same story but flipped.
Hmm.
That was my only major disappointment. Is now that I'm more familiar with Neil Gaiman's work, I was just like, you've already kind of played this song, but
It was like a cover of his own work.
kind of. And again, I think it was great. I liked it better than
No, I could see
Coraline,
that.
but it is a visually impressive film that
All right. Well, oh no, go ahead.
no, I was
Sorry.
gonna say that you can see a lot of influences in, and I mean a big part of that is the fact that it is a Jim Henson Company thing, and they've done a lot of these now, and they're really good at it.
I didn't have that same reaction. I This is my first time watching it, so I didn't have any fond memories watching it. I do remember when it was in production because I was following the production of it because I was excited about something coming out that was going to be kind of along the lines of Labyrinth or Neverending Story or Dark Crystal because I was such a fan of those growing up. But then I think because it went straight to video, I just never picked it up. So this is my first time watching it, and you know what? I wish it was practicals. I wish it was practical stuff instead of the 2005 computer imagery,
I
because
agree.
that kind of it took me out of it because it just felt so 2005 CGI. I don't think it aged that well.
I don't disagree, but I will say because that was like such a dropping point in CGI where like it was really bad before this, and then it had this really weird awkward phase, and then it like got really good really fast. So this would be something that today was a stylistic choice.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it almost feels stylistic because of how old the CGI is, if that makes any sense. But I do agree, practicals would have held up better. And why work with the Jim Henson Company if you're not gonna do practicals?
And I was wondering that, and I was thinking, I was like, okay, so this must have been a moment, and I'm basing this is purely speculation. When the Jim Henson Company was deciding where its future was, what are they going to stick doing puppetry and animatronics, or was this their thought like maybe it's time for us to move into a different realm and start exploring CGI visual effects more deeply? And I feel like this came out, and then I don't think they've done anything like this since. Because I don't
Not
think
that I'm
there's this.
aware
I don't
of.
think there. No, not that. Yeah, I don't think there's any puppet work in this. This is all animation,
The
and you can
only
see.
puppet work is the literal opening when she's using sock puppets. That's it. That is the
Okay,
only puppet work in the movie.
that's true. I mean, yeah, we open in a kind of surrealist circus, and yeah, there are practical effects there before we get into the kind of dream mirror mask world where everything becomes CGI. You know, everything, so much of this movie to me looked like video game advertisements of that era or the late 90s. I don't know if that makes sense or if it's something I made up in my head, but I feel like if I was flipping through a PlayStation magazine about this time, maybe 2003, 2002, I would have seen advertisements for kind of like edgy video games that would have used this style. I do not have a concrete example of this. It's just what. it made me think of. Like some of those LucasArts Grim Fandango um games. I don't know if that made any sense at all.
I mean, to a degree, because again, it is the CGI of that era. Um, yeah, it's so weird because Sony and them, so like they developed this at Jim Henson's like family house with Brian Henson, and Sony uh had basically been like, we want to make a new Labyrinth because Labyrinth and Dark Crystal had just released on DVD and sales were
Mm.
booming, and they were like, we need to there's clearly a market for this. And they debated making a prequel for the Dark Crystal or a sequel for Labyrinth, but then they decided to just do something in the spirit of those and make a new Jim Henson fantasy title. And then did none of the things that made the other two original movies so successful. They
There
did
were
only
so many.
they only had a
Oh,
four
so
million
there's so many
budget.
$4 million budget.
Yeah, that might have been it.
I can see that.
Because
Um,
there's only like five people in this movie.
yeah, it is not. Yeah, because so many people are doing double duty between the real world and the dream world. Um,
Yeah,
but even so, there's a lot of times when it's just our main character, and this I watched this 2 weeks ago, so now I gotta look up her name.
Helena.
Uh, Helena. There's so many times where it's just Helena and Valentine on screen with wild stuff going on behind, like all the CGI effects going on behind them. And then maybe somebody doing the voice of a CG character or those weird CG cats that I think are kind of one of the iconic creatures of this movie. There's a lot of time in this movie where it's just people probably alone in a room with that's all green screen, which I think it's a very hard thing to do. And I think they mostly act their way through it. I don't know that anybody here is putting out a great performance. But I think they're working with what they have. I think those are pretty difficult conditions to kind of emote in, just because you're in a green room by yourself most of the time.
And I will say that this was 20 years ago when they made it. So like now filming in a green screen studio the whole movie is normal. They've got
Oh,
it
that yeah,
down.
that's the standard now.
They've got it down to a science. Back then, it was still like it was probably a lot harder.
I think
The-
so. Like if you ever look at some of the footage from the first Space Jam movie behind the scenes, you realize how much of that movie was literally just Michael Jordan by himself talking to a tennis ball. It's just, it really does take a certain level of skill to be able to act in those conditions. And then yeah, like thinking about the Marvel movies, like when they're even doing some of the basic scenes in just a regular room, they'll just do that in green screen at this point, so don't have to worry about the lighting. This, it's something that's so standard now, and yeah, back then just was not a thing.
yeah.
And I think actors now have kind of learned to work with it. I think everybody who's doing the Marvel movies is so used to it. They've been doing it for 20 years. Whereas at this point, everybody's just dipping their toe into that.
Well, 100%. But also, I think one of the things with Marvel is I've noticed recently they're hiring a lot more actors who do stage work.
Oh, really?
I mean, yeah, even like look at Tom Holland. He was Billy Elliot in on Broadway. Like
I'd
he
forgotten about that.
a lot of them have, and like so when you're on the stage, especially until like production, sets and stuff haven't been built, so you're basically just talking to an empty room pointing at things that aren't there. So I think stage actors have a easier time with it. That's just my opinion. Um,
Oh, I would have never made that connection. That's a very good point.
but because I did notice, because once I started thinking about it, I was like, they do have a lot of people that have also found success on the stage for all these big CGI franchises. And even look at like Daniel Radcliffe and stuff. He's done a lot of stage work. A lot of like child actors from those franchises move into stage work because they're used to just being in a green screen area.
That makes sense.
But yeah, no, I think this was probably 10 times harder because we've got techniques down. We know how to facilitate and accommodate for the green scene studio because it's our primary medium. Back then, it had to be a nightmare. She was carrying that movie for a lot of it.
Yeah, that's I mean that's a lot to ask of a young actress because she was who was
She was like 21 at the
Stephanie
time.
Leonidas. Yeah, she was
Yes.
pretty young. And she's just on her own throughout most of that movie. There's other people who come in and out, but so she is in most of the movie. We're following her pretty much exclusively. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. There
I
are. Uh, mhm.
I was gonna shift gears, so if you've got more on this, keep going.
No, I wanted to go back to what you were saying before about how Labyrinth Labyrinth gets released on DVD. It's a huge hit. Years of it being kind of a cult movie, and then realization that like it's a beloved piece of so many people's childhoods, and they want to go back and kind of recapture that magic. They make this movie, which I always thought was in that vein of Labyrinth, in that it was aimed at a younger audience. And first time watching it, I was like, "Oh, this is really not aimed at a younger audience. This is aimed at probably teenagers." Whereas Labyrinth is something that I watched. Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, Neverending Story. I watched all those when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old for the first time, and I absolutely don't think I would sit my daughter down to watch this movie because I think it skews much older. So I found that very
Yes.
surprising.
Yeah. I do not disagree at all. It didn't even occur to me to show this to my son anytime soon. Not that it's scary or anything. It's just not aimed at him.
Right. The visual, I mean, the stark visuals, this highly stylized thing, it's inherently kind of scary. And I think that's one of the things where the CGI being, very early on in like a fully CGI movie, it lives just inside the uncanny valley, even when it just always looks so strange and alien
I think
and
that worked
scary.
for it to a degree because it gives it a weird dreamlike state because
Right.
everything makes sense, but it's off. And you can tell it's off. But if you had to tell them how it was off, you would have to really like focus on it. But like, and they've got the swimming and fish and stuff. They did a very good job, I think, and I think that CGI especially helps give it an ethereal, dreamy vibe. Uh, because it is just bad enough that you're like, okay, that's just all background stuff that hasn't been fully loaded in. But
Mm.
I remember when it came out, the stylisticness of it was actually like well received. um, like when it came out,
Sure, because I don't think nobody had seen something like this before. This was
yes,
this was an important attempt,
yes,
but I
yeah,
don't think it made it all the way there.
like you and me both were watching its progress when it was being made. I feel like a lot of people were paying attention to this to see how well they did it. Because it was like I remember seeing the trailer when it came out, and I was just like, "Holy crap! Like this could be really good."
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize this took place in Brighton when they're in the real world.
Oh yeah.
Um, just because her apartment complex is so run down, I just assumed the circus was like currently traveling through Eastern Europe. I was like, this is clearly
It
an
was.
ex-Soviet place. That's where circuses like to travel through.
Where did they film it? Because I had the
Brighton.
same thought. I was like, oh, it was shot in Brighton and
It was
took
shot
place
in
in Brighton.
Brighton. Yeah. Yeah, that apparently her apartment building is like an iconic building in Brighton because it's right there on the beach. Because they were originally going to film in London, but then they were convinced to film it in Brighton because it has a lot more of a boho feel, and it made more sense that that's where a bunch of circus folk lived.
That makes I get that. Like they clearly didn't have a lot of money. They were living in squalor. Like, or I don't know. The inside of their apartment was okay, but it definitely felt like the outside of their apartment. It reminded me of Candyman, like when they were in the projects in the old
Yeah,
Candyman movie. I was just like, oh, these people are really hard up.
yeah, no, and like you get that feel like immediately, and that's why I always thought they were traveling through Eastern Europe because that's like the stereotypical Eastern Europe look, and especially with how concerned they were about the mom being in hospital, I thought it was because they weren't like in England. But now it just turns out that they're really poor.
Yeah.
So, what are your overall thoughts on it? Like, weird CGI aside.
I mean, the story was a little basic. I had a kind of a hard time following it,
The
and I don't know
story
if it's just,
is very whimsical. It,
well, I mean, like, we have the like, oh, we've entered this dream world. She's been kind of replaced by her evil counterpart. In the real world, she's been replaced by her evil counterpart from the dream. She needs to get the mirror mask to get back into the real world. And then we're watching her journey through this dream place.
yeah, it's
And it
again,
just felt like we were
it's.
going from scene to scene.
I was about to say, it's like you're it's like if you had just followed in Labyrinth, if you just followed her through the labyrinth without cutting between new areas. Um,
Right.
And yeah, it's just like, oh, you're gonna need to go talk to the giants. All right, we've gone and talked to the giants. They've said something kind of cryptic, and we didn't really learn anything, but the characters might have. Oh, they're moving to a new area. Okay, there's bird things now. Flying around with
The
bird
bird things were the
things.
weirdest. The bird things were the weirdest part of this movie.
You
That
are.
was where it's like, that's where I needed to take a break.
You know what it's like? I mean, I just haven't felt it since I was like 5 years old. When you're with people who are running errands and you're just like in the back seat of the car and like you're along for the journey, but you don't really have a stake or a full understanding into what the hell is going on.
Right. It's like I'm just watching these events unfold. And that's fine. But it's just like I'm never exactly sure why anything's happening. It's like,
Yeah.
why are we with these giant birds?
Like her finding
Why
the
are
mirror
these big birds
mask,
here?
all of that. Yeah, like why one bird talked differently than the other birds. Nothing's ever explained. If you want a movie where there's an explanation, uh,
This is not it.
this is not it. There was supposed to be a prequel graphic novel that was about the evil, her breaking out of this world. And it was her big escape that sets up everything. And I feel like that was supposed to fill in a lot of it, but that got canceled. And then there is a children's book, but I doubt we're going to get more out of the children's book. But yeah, I feel like they had really been anticipating the graphic novel fleshing out the world a little bit.
Even so, you can't count on the general audience having watched or having sought out the graphic novel
Yeah.
prequel. Yeah, it was just like it's like I know that a lot of this movie is vibes. This is such a vibes movie. Like we're vibing on the sort of alt 2005 scene. You know, you're saying how the soundtrack was really good. And it felt at times like, oh, this is a movie that is a visualization of the soundtrack to the kind of vibe of 2005's alternative scene. Like when she's in the circus and we're seeing like this the way the circus is set up, and it's such a beautiful movie set. It's like it's such a beautiful idea, these visuals. Like if it's worth watching just to see like the development of these ideas. Like you could see where they start and what they're trying to go for. I don't think they get all the way there. But if you want to understand what alternative art was attempting in this era, I think this is a good example of it.
Yeah, like even the movie poster is basically something that Midjourney would just like spit out now, and someone would
Oh, sure.
post. So it'd be like, look at this weird, like surreal thing that got spit out by Midjourney, and it's like, yeah, no, it's visually really cool, but yeah, you're right. It's just like a
But
visualization of that scene
it doesn't make it's one of those things where it's like if you start looking at the background, you're going to see things that don't make sense.
because the whole world is built out of the drawings that she's just been doodling and sketching on her bedroom wall for who knows how long. So it is like nonsensical. And things aren't built right because she's just doodling.
So here's a question. She enters this dream world after she has a fight with her mother. Her mother is sick, ends up in the hospital. She goes into this dream world while her mother's in the hospital, and you know, I initially interpret it as this is how she's kind of coming to terms with the fact that she might not see her mom again. Or is it real? Because the end of the movie kind of implies that it was real because she runs into the real world equivalent of a character she met in the dream world. What do you think? Do you think it's supposed to be real?
I think it's supposed to be real, especially since it was trying to be Labyrinth. And that's kind of how they end Labyrinth, where she ends up back on her bed and it's like, was it all a dream? And then all of them pop out at the end. I
Hmm.
think that Valentine showing up and immediately having chemistry with her and looking to join her circus implies that it was real and this is just her world's Valentine.
Right.
Um, that's how I'm reading it because again, with how much they were trying to recreate Labyrinth, that would seem like a parody of the ending. But
Yeah.
I don't know if it's fully established. Um, it does say in like the movie synopsis at the end, like Helena becomes fascinated by a young man strongly resembling Valentine who wants to be a juggler for the circus. So Valentine either got out via the mirror mask, which wouldn't shock me, or
Sure.
it's
That
just real life Valentine. Um, but I'm not sure because no time actually passed. None of the stuff that happened in the real world that was done by evil Helena actually happened.
right.
So, again, much like in Labyrinth, no time has actually passed.
Hmm.
So,
Well, I hope she learned a lesson about fighting with her mom. And I hope her mom learned a lesson that you shouldn't keep your children in the circus if they don't want to be there.
Turns out she wanted to be
That did
there. She just wanted it to be her choice.
That's fair. I don't know. I guess that makes sense. I feel like they both. She was being a little bit too mean, but I feel like she had a point at the beginning of the movie when they get into their fight. I was trying to be very cognizant of like your kid, like
You're,
children's choices.
yeah, and it's also one of those kids' movies where it's like your parents are people too.
Right. Parents make mistakes. It's okay.
They're complex beings with complex thoughts and emotions, and they're not perfect.
Yeah, it's one of the things I've realized as my daughter has gotten older, and she's 7, and I still think a lot of her arguments are the arguments of a 7-year-old. But now I feel like there's gonna come a point where she's like 16 and will probably be making valid arguments of an adult, a young adult, and I'm not going to take her seriously because I've gotten so used to arguing with her as a 7-year-old. And I feel like maybe that's where this movie lives. At the point where you are becoming an adult, but your parents are still seeing you as a child who they know what's best for. And at that same time, you're dealing with the fact that your parents are mortal and have an end point, and you might not be ready for that yet. Maybe, I think that's an important stage that we all, hopefully everybody gets to. Not everybody does, but yeah, maybe in that light, I like this movie a little more. Not that I disliked it.
I'm glad I revisited it. I don't think I need to anytime soon. Once my son gets older, I would love to, but this is like an every decade plus for me. This isn't an every year film.
Been 25 years, so you'll watch this. So you watch this movie 4 times in a century.
Yeah,
It's funny how that could be enough.
I know.
We'll revisit this again when we have grandchildren.
Episode 500.
Well, that would only be, that would be like 20 years from now. Oh no, that was accurate.
Yeah. Oh no.
Oh no.
Well, where can they find us, Sam?
You're going to find us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at RTSpiritsPod. And if you have anything you think we should cover, any spooky children's movies, weird children's movies, you think would be good for us to talk about, you want to hear our thoughts on, let us know. We'd love to hear what you have to think. And if you have any thoughts on Mirrormask, let us know those too.
And do we want to tease next week or do we want to say goodbye?
Oh, let's tease. That way people have a chance to watch it before it comes out. Or in
Oh,
2 weeks.
okay.
Oh my god, we have a lot coming up between now and the end of the year. It's going to be really good. So
Yeah.
next week or in 2 weeks, we're doing Beetlejuice, which by the time the Beetlejuice episode airs, like the new Beetlejuice movie will have been in theaters for a little bit. Because it comes out in like 2 days from when we're recording.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to see it right when it comes out because I never get to the movies.
I've been to the movies like once or twice in the last 5 years. I never get to the movies.
We'll get there together one
Yeah,
day.
one day.
All right.
All right,
All
everyone.
right. Tune in next time. We'll see you then.
Night.
Good night.